All right, so during this presentation, I will be discussing a systematic review that we've been conducting on the impact of professional learning, focused on MTSS educator outcomes as well as implementation. And we started this project, as KBK had said, at the Co-EDU grant, and so I'm happy to share what we have found so far. So before I start, I want to provide some information about what MTSS is. MTSS is a multiple tiered supportive systems. It is a public health approach to education that can be used to improve various student outcomes. It involves intensifying instruction and intervention based on student need, which is determined by data gathered through universal screening as well as progress monitoring. So the practices that comprise of MTSS are required in federal and state laws and regulations. These include provisions that emphasize practices associated with an MTSS framework. States vary in how they responded to these provisions, but many states have mandated assessment, instruction, and intervention in data-based decision-making practices. But we find out that it works. MTS is something that has demonstrated through implementation, assessment, instruction, intervention, and data-based decision-making within the MTSS framework to improve academic and behavior outcomes of our students. Particularly that we see those outcomes when one has implemented it with fidelity. However, we are unsure to what extent to which educators can actually implement MTSS with fidelity. Some researchers say that we should scale it up, but that's unreasonable. Others say that it's all about the professional learning that we put forth in front of our educators to teach them how to understand and implement MTSS. So what is emphasized is the importance of teams of educators working together to use data and information to learn how to improve the outcomes of students. Professional learning of MTSS implementation really is a social learning process in which educators learn as members of a group in which they share information, ideas, thoughts, and etc. Although there are studies that indicate that professional learning for MTSS results in improved educator and implementation outcomes, the literature is new and we don't know what types of professional learning practices are impactful. So we set out to identify what the impact of MTSS implementation is on educator and implementation outcomes. So using a Boolean search strategy with the intervention, focus, type, population, and research design, key terms such as MTSS, professional learning, educator, and qualitative, we search various databases such as PsycInfo, ERIC, and Google for sources. The literature had to have been published between 1997 and May of 2018. It is also important to note that we included quant, qual, single case, and mixed methods. So we ended up with 3,209 articles that were screened through for inclusion at the abstract level and again at the full text screening. If they made it through the full text, we then extracted all of the data from each of the articles. So in order to assess the quality of each of the source's content, we utilized checklists based on the source's study design. For example, for quantitative designs, we used a tool developed by Kimmel, Lee, and Cook in 2004 that includes a 14-item checklist, including items for random allocation, blinding, and control of confounding variables. Currently, we are in the extraction phase, and we're deriving themes and extracting effect sizes from each of the included sources. So this includes standardized mean differences, odd ratios, and then we're also coding and identifying major themes for each of the research questions while making any necessary revisions to the finalized conceptual framework. So we're really busy. And we've been able to publish our study's protocol in the BMJ Open. So our initial search was 3,200 sources, and then it moved to 22,437 sources after the abstract phase. And now we're sitting with 223 sources that we are extracting information from. And so far, our preliminary findings include 18 quantitative, 17 qualitative, 8 single case, and 3 mixed method sources. And these sources mainly focus on trainings, job-embedded coaching, and professional learning communities targeting teachers, admins, special educators, and schools leadership teams. So regarding the outcomes of our quantitative sources, we've noticed that based on a calculated effect sizes, a majority of the trainings and job-embedded coaching approaches have been effective in increasing MTSS implementation fidelity, as well as educator skills and knowledge around MTSS, whether that be responsive intervention or positive behavior interventions and support. For our qualitative sources, themes suggest that though there are complications in the day-to-day life of a teacher, strong professional learning communities can positively influence MTSS implementation. Additionally, strong PLCs have been categorized by shared goals, shared leadership, and collaborative school environment. As some of us know, single case design focuses on single subjects. And the studies around these sources have been related to providing teachers with direct coaching or performance feedback. And we see that performance feedback, when it's been given, it increases implementation of MTSS. When it's taken away, it decreases it. So ultimately, the amount of useful data and outcomes that we've extracted so far have been blowing our minds. We understand that it takes systematic, ongoing professional learning and coaching approaches to adequately train educators to understand and implement MTSS. So the people do matter when it comes to building the MTSS pyramid. Without them, we cannot properly serve our students. So we're in the process of beginning to disseminate our findings. We are presenting at national conferences attended by typical MTSS scholars and implementers. We're also drafting a scoping review for literature to summarize what we've found already. And finally, we'll be developing a publication plan to disseminate what we've learned so far. And we viewed this particular systematic review as our first of 2 systematic reviews. The second review will focus on the impact MTSS implementation has on student outcomes. So recently we put in a Spencer Grant proposal to conduct this review and hope to hear positive news within the next couple of months. But as I mentioned earlier, collaborative professional learning that includes ongoing training and coaching improves educator knowledge, skills, and dispositions, and improves the fidelity of implementation of the practices associated with MTSS. Our findings also indicate that we cannot underestimate the importance of providing professional learning that empowers groups of educators to make sense of the practices and to work together to implement and improve student outcomes. Thank you.